The recent unresolved tensions between the West and Russia over the issue of NATO's plans for expansion in Eastern Europe, and Ukraine in particular, triggered great interest by the masses about NATO. In this video, I will not only tell you what NATO is and what its purposes are, but I will also explain how it influenced the economies of Europe and the United States for more than 70 years, and why it continues to play a major role in shaping the economic relations between Europe and the USA and between Europe and the rest of the world. Watch till the end to get all the hidden secrets and facts about NATO. Ready? Let's go. After World War II, more and more nations around the world became red states and part of the new Soviet Union. America became wary and uncomfortable. The competition was on and it was lagging behind. So in 1949, it created a military pact called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, aka NATO, for the purpose of placing weapons in member states in order to achieve more effective defense in the event of a Soviet attack. In 1991, and contrary to most misleading and incorrect information out there, Russia voluntarily declared that the Soviet Union no longer exists and that it is not interested in the continuation of the Cold War. Russia went on to become a capitalist state with strong socialist aspects, which led most former Soviet Union states to follow suit. NATO is a security alliance of 30 countries from North America and Europe. According to NATO's website, it is the practical means through which the security of North America and Europe are permanently tied together. NATO enlargement has furthered the US goal of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. It is worth mentioning here that the core of NATO's agenda is very anti-Russia and anti-China. It literally considers both countries as aggressors and enemy entities. Many experts believe that most current and prospect member states stopped considering Russia and China as enemies or even possible aggressors more than 3 decades ago, despite occasional differences and disagreements. NATO presents itself as a force of diplomacy and soft power that will only resort to military force if one of its members is attacked. According to NATO, its political agenda is based on the promotion of democratic values. Nevertheless, it is not mentioned anywhere in the NATO agenda and rules for membership that a member state has to be democratic and free. It also fails in defining democracy and freedom, except in economic terms, meaning all current member states and any potential members have to be capitalist states with free markets. In a nutshell, NATO is a Cold War dinosaur. It is a massive military force. All member states must contribute to and host NATO military bases. They also must accept, if asked, the placement of American and NATO nuclear weapons, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and missile defense systems in their countries. Officially, NATO has zero economic and financial obligations towards member states, even if a country financially and economically collapses. In recent years, the nature of NATO and America's strong grip on it has been the subject of much chatter by the political and business elites in many member states. This chatter increased recently due to the Ukraine crisis. By the way, Ukraine is not a member of NATO but wants to become one. Many are beginning to wonder whether NATO is creating unnecessary risks to member states because, in the case one country is attacked, it means all other members must engage in the response to the attack, even if it leads to World War III or potential annihilation of smaller or weaker states, while Canada and the USA are thousands of miles away in the safety of geographic isolation. It is no secret that NATO, since the end of the Cold War, contributed to the continuous rise of America as a global economic superpower. NATO has been a hidden force that psychologically pushes Europe to intensively focus its economic direction, investments, and trade towards the United States, since it is under the American-dominated NATO protection racket. There are plenty of rosy materials out there that literally attribute the economic success of Europe in general and NATO members in particular to the existence of NATO. Such unscholarly attributions are nothing short of an insult to the European people and governments alike. NATO was never a force that drove the Europeans to rebuild after World War II, nor was it a magical source for the European people's innovation, determination, hard work, and creativity that led Europe to become a global leader in all fields. This leads us to the question, does NATO contribute to the economic strength of member states? The answer is yes, according to NATO and a very few bankers, leaders, and analysts who insist that the increased economic activity and foreign investment flows into some new NATO member states can be attributed to joining the military alliance. Regardless, the answer is mostly no, according to non-politically motivated analysis. Here is why. There is not a single piece of hard evidence that European states that joined NATO became more economically prosperous due to NATO. However, there is plenty of evidence that many of these states are reaping the benefits of membership in the European Union, which is a comprehensive free trade and open economy bloc that brings plenty of benefits to member states and even to states seeking to become members during the transition process. Here are a few arguments on how NATO benefits members and new members. According to NATO official statements, the economic performance of any country can depend on its ability to provide long-term security and stability. These prerequisites not only promote domestic economic activity, but also increase the trust of a country's investors and foreign partners, as well as foster a country's integration into wider regional and international economic value chains. While the economic performance and prosperity of a nation are not the primary concern of NATO's collective security, its direct function, the provision of security, has a major positive spillover effect on political and economic stability. After joining NATO in 2004, economic activity in Estonia and Latvia increased significantly. By 2005, GDP in Estonia jumped from 6.5% to 9.5%, and in Latvia from 8.7% to 10.6%. In Estonia, foreign investment more than tripled from $965.8 million to $3.1 billion after NATO accession. Similarly, such trends started going upwards in Albania, Bulgaria, Latvia, and Lithuania as well. Along with FDI, development assistance has been long recognized as a tool for lifting a nation out of poverty and ensuring its long-term economic prosperity. It is important to point out here that NATO attributes the entire economic growth by these states to NATO membership. NATO did not provide any detailed evidence, it merely capitalized on these nations' growth. Meanwhile, some other NATO member states have experienced serious economic crises, such as Greece, which suffered immense economic downturns from 2008 to 2018. During this period, Greece was rescued by the European Union while it continued to pay and contribute to NATO for the protection racket. According to NATO statistics, the level of new foreign investment going into Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic is rising or has remained stable. Analysts say investors are responding to the reduced risk of investing in those countries, and that NATO gets at least part of the credit. However, in Poland, the overall foreign investment has declined in the past 2 years. Vike Kronenberg, an economic analyst specializing in Central Europe at the investment bank Salomon Smith Barney in London, says, since 1999, the amount of foreign investment going into the Czech Republic and Hungary each year is roughly double what it was before NATO expansion. In Poland, direct foreign investment remains one of the few bright spots in an otherwise lackluster economy. Investors are responding to the reduced risk. Nevertheless, according to researchers, the NATO effect is probably small. A 1998 study in Hungary attempted to quantify the economic impact in Hungary of NATO entry. It concluded that entry into NATO would bring in around $50 million a year in foreign investment. or well under 5% of the total. According to Robert Hazak, Director of Marketing for the Czech investment promotion agency CzechInvest, foreign direct investment since 1999 has grown to around $5 billion to $6 billion a year in the Czech Republic. This is approximately double the amount before that. However, he failed to mention that the Czechs have been aggressive in adopting a system of investment incentives, including tax breaks and rebates for companies relocating to economically depressed areas. NATO and its cheerleaders in the private and public sectors alike seem to attribute the economic growth of many European countries to the alliance as if these nations were cripples just waiting for NATO's military bases and nuclear weapons to save them. The United Kingdom left the EU in 2021. Its leaders went as far as describing it as a threat to its sovereignty. Nevertheless, it is pursuing a very aggressive stance on the Ukraine crisis while pushing for more NATO expansion. In conclusion, there is no evidence that NATO contributed to the economic advancement of Europe, but it is now and has been contributing greatly to securing America's global economic and geopolitical interest. The positive economic impact of NATO on new members is overstated. Meanwhile, NATO's negative political, economic, budgetary, and financial impact is underestimated and widely ignored. Would you like to learn more about what influences the world economies and global financial flows? Click on one of the videos that showed up on the left or go to our channel to find other interesting topics.